big friends, maybe you're friends, I'm friendly with him, but fans of Dr. Marty McCary, who appears on Fox regularly, works at Johns Hopkins, and has written a lot about this, as well as Dr. Nicole Sapphire, who's a Fox contributor with us. And it seems like there is some overreaction in the air to this, especially considering the drugs that we regularly take that have more extreme side effects, like birth control, which leads to blood clots and obviously much higher percentages than 7 of 6.8 million people who died because of the blood clots from the J&J vaccine.
Well, actually, just to jump in real quick, there was actually only one who died. It was 6. No, it was 6 clots, one of which was lethal. Actually, just to 1 in a million. 1 in a million was the clotting. No, it was 6 clots, one of which was lethal. Yeah, 1 in a million. 1 in a million.
Because that's the demographic which all of the victims, whether the clot and the death, came in. But what I'm really concerned about is not how much vaccine is available. And President Biden said yesterday we have enough mRNA vaccines between Pfizer and Moderna to vaccinate everybody who wants to be, but that we're going to have vaccine hesitancy grow out of this incident.
Yep.
And then people will be turning down their Pfizer shots. They will be turning down their Moderna shots if we ever get AstraZeneca. And
well, they'll be turning down their J&J shots. I think if J&J comes back, which I imagine,
even done.
Right.
I think J&J is done.
What do you mean by done? Like, you think it's basically so tainted?
Not want it. Yeah, I think that the way that it was messaged, first of all, even that I thought everybody had died, right? And I'm paying attention. There was already vaccine hesitancy about J&J to the point that the mayor of Detroit declined a shipment of J&J vaccine, and he had to walk that back. But there was so much bad information about the 65.
And Michigan is a mess. Like, Michigan is the only place in the country, really, that is a giant flaming hotspot right now. It's not a place where anyone should be turning down any safe and effective vaccines. And this was before the pause that happened. It's just...
Exactly. It's going to be really bad. And then you're going to get into the conversations, which was what the mayor of Detroit was talking about, that is the J&J vaccine going to, traditionally disenfranchised groups like our black and brown people getting this vaccine because it's this bad one. And it's going to be a horrible, horrible mess. And I do think the decision was perhaps made too hastily. Again, saying I'm not an expert in this, and I know Nate Silver has weighed in a lot on it in the same way that we're talking right now, and people have been, pushing back, stay in your lane, blah, blah, blah. I'm not pretending I'm a doctor, but if you just look at the numbers, it seemed like too swift of an
Well, we can also just sort of do the math, and this is the point that I made in the opening monologue as well. You don't have to be an expert to do and recognize basic math and basic risk assessment, and comparing the potential risk with no causality proven here versus, as you mentioned, birth control and on other fronts. And then we look at a very similar movie that played out across in Europe a month ago over AstraZeneca with pauses and just cratering public confidence in that vaccine, even though the officials came back and said, oh, yeah, we studied it. It's fine. We're back in business. By that point, the damage was done. And you mentioned this, and I know this was not your intent, but I just want to make clear for our audience. When you refer to the J&J vaccine as the bad one, that's the stereotype that some people are internalizing, but it's not true. It is a good vaccine that works incredibly well. And I said it on the show yesterday. I will reiterate it now. If I had not already had Moderna with one shot, and now I'll get my second Moderna in a couple weeks and be done with it, I would be at the front of the line asking for a J&J shot. In some ways, I preferred J&J because it was one and done, and I didn't have to schedule something out in the future, and it's extremely effective and safe. But now, and I can just tell you anecdotally, I have friends, generally left-leaning but not completely, who are saying, well, this is probably, better safe than sorry. what if they had not reacted this way and then there were more cases and there was a cover-up, and if they just follow up and dot their I's, cross their T's, and say, all right, every jot and tittle has been reviewed and everything's safe, that should be good enough, that should be reassuring. I'm just not sure that's how people's brains work and how people feel emotionally. And on the other end of that experiential spectrum, I've heard from other people who were already a little bit hesitant about vaccines freaking out about this and wondering, is this vindication for their hesitancy? And a lot of people take the next step, the next jump. This is the one that's obsessing me, is if they were cutting corners, so to speak, on Johnson & Johnson, which they weren't. And by the way, if this were a widespread problem with blood clotting, it would have shown up in the tens of thousands of people in the trial. This was a rigorous and thorough trial. But if people get it in their heads that corners were cut to the point that they had to pause everything to sort of double back and double check their work, who's to say that a month from now they won't do the same thing on Pfizer for some reason? That's how people's sort of logic works in a lot of cases. And I can't necessarily blame them. You have to blame the people making the decisions and the experts who are seemingly very split on this question, just fueling this problem at almost the worst possible time.
100% on that front. And to go back to the quote where I said the bad vaccine, I was using air quotes. It's not a bad vaccine at all. It's an amazing vaccine, and it has the same level of effectiveness in preventing severe COVID hospitalization and death as Moderna and Pfizer.
Correct.
And that's what we are all trying to avoid now, especially that we've moved down to the younger age groups. If you're 80 years old, you're having a different conversation about COVID because, we will likely be okay if we get sick, fingers crossed that we don't. Senior citizen does not have the same odds. But like you, I'm incredibly concerned about it. As someone who is in that age range, I think that I might think twice about J&J, but not about vaccines in general. And that's why I think that pulling it for that specific age group might have been the smarter thing to do.
Yeah, they could have done it, but
nuanced. Right.
But that even goes, but Jesse, just to make the point, and I'm not blaming you at all, and I'm not going to ask you any personal details, but there are people in your age group who are also on oral contraceptives all the time and have been for years, and it's safe and available because it's, a very tiny, tiny chance of blood clotting, but still a bigger chance than with J&J.
Forever.
There you go. So you've been on that, but even you're a logical, usually rational person who understands basic statistics, and you and I generally agree on this. But even with all of that backdrop, you're still saying you might think twice, even though it's just these astronomically huge numbers and tiny, 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 tiny microscopic fraction of possible linkage and cases. That is seeping into either your consciousness or even subconsciousness to the point that you'd say, maybe I would think twice about it. If that's how you're reacting, it's not hard to extrapolate how many other people who came into this from a very different perspective, how they would respond and how they are responding. That is what really gets to me here.
Yeah, there is, as usual, no nuance to how these things are discussed, and I wish that I could say I would feel 100% confident in all three vaccines equally, even in light of this information. But I got rattled to some degree, especially because it is my target demo. Now, I wouldn't feel that way if I was outside the demo, and I have been on birth control for 15 plus years. So obviously I live with a risk of blood clots that I'm comfortable with. But there's also, people know if they have blood clots, history of it in their families. You're more prone to have it if that is the case. And they also need to study the impact of what these women were also on.
See, that's part of what I think, and I know you've got to run, and this is part of what I addressed earlier as well. If they had simply said, we've become aware of an incredibly tiny fraction of people who have had this effect. We don't know if it's a causal side effect or not. It's 6 individuals out of 7 million. They all fall within this age group, and we are therefore just putting out an advisory that we are studying this further. If you're a woman between the ages of 18 and 48, especially if you have any history of blood clots in your family, we're just advising you that we're looking further into this, and then let people make choices based on the overwhelming evidence and the safety and the vetting process that got the green light with flying colors from the FDA previously on this vaccine. That, to me, would have been more defensible than the splashy, headline-grabbing nationwide pause, which really signals and indicates a problem, right? A real serious problem and a huge outsized risk that the evidence doesn't support, not even close 100%. At this time. So we'll leave it there for now, Jesse. I think we actually, by and large, agree on this. I know you've got to run and do some television. Go make some television. Jesse Tarloff, our friend, our colleague here at Fox News, on The Guy Benson Show, chief romance correspondent. Thanks, Jesse.
Bye.
We'll be right back.
The Guy Benson Show. More next.
You need to know about owning real gold and silver. It's a lot easier than you think. Call the Oxford Gold Group right now at 833-600-GOLD to get your free gold and silver investment guide. Put your savings and retirement accounts into something real, like gold and silver. Get your free Oxford Gold Group investment guide today and learn how easy it is to have real gold and silver delivered to your home, or how you can have real gold and silver in your retirement account. Don't sit back and watch your savings and retirement account suffer. Now is the time to make your money work as hard for you as you did for your money. So do this. Call the Oxford Gold Group right now, today, 833-600-GOLD. That's 833-600-GOLD.
Guys, we need to clear a path here.
Indeed knows unexpected employee turnover can stall your business.
Sounds like tonight. John.
Like at Chris's logistics company. To avoid things grinding to a halt, he needs to get started hiring right away.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. And the moment you sponsor a job on Indeed, you get a short list of quality candidates from our resume database. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get a $75 credit for your first sponsored job post. Terms and conditions apply.
Here's a message just for the attorneys out there. So you passed the bar, joined a firm, or even built your own. Now are you finding out that you're doing more administration than actual law practice? Lexicon can help. Lexicon is a legal services and technology provider with over a decade of experience streamlining administrative tasks like timekeeping, HR, billing, client intake, and more, so you can focus on maximizing billable hours and increasing client satisfaction. Call 855-4-LEXICON or visit lexiconservices.com/go to learn more.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network.
Hey, it's Will Kane, co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend. Join me every Monday and Friday as I share my thoughts on a wide range of topics, from sports and pop culture to politics and business. With the help of newsmakers and personalities, I will provide you my free, unfiltered, uncancelable opinion on the hottest topics in America.
The Will Kane Podcast. Subscribe and listen now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts. America is listening to Fox News.
I'm Ashley Dvorkin with the Fox Profile. Hollywood's biggest night caps off a season of virtual, hybrid, even pre-taped ceremonies due to the pandemic. And the Oscars plan to take place April 25th in person. Here's Variety film and media reporter Angelique Jackson.
The current plan for the Oscars this year is to have a largely in-person ceremony. The ceremony is going to take place at Union Station in Los Angeles, with, we understand, some of the performances taking place at the Dolby Theater.
A no Zoom rule led to changes for those based and working internationally.
There are so many travel restrictions in place right now that it's not totally feasible for everyone to make it to Los Angeles. So at this point, the producers have announced that there will be a remote location in London, and they're working on plans for other international locations.
And several aspects are still TBA.
Will the nominees wear masks throughout the entire ceremony? There's also a cocktail party for the attendees as well. How is that exactly going to work?
Ashley Dvorkin, Fox News.
Nothing beats the Fox News app.
Breaking news, alerts, opinion, and all your favorite shows available anytime.
It's free. It's fun. It's got the 5.
Get access to all things Fox News right in the palm of your hand. The Fox News app. Download it today. The Women of the Bible Speak, a new book from Shannon Bream.
The women of the Bible live timeless stories. By examining them, we can understand what it means to be a woman of faith today.
The Women of the Bible Speak, available now at foxnews.com/books.
Все потеряны, это правда. Потому что это мир в мире, но какой-то растерянный, да, мы все одной мишурой покрыты, да. Вот. И очень важно эту дорогу все-таки как-то очищать.
И вот для вас это сегодняшнее время, такое вот необычное, да, с невозможностью поездок за границу, с какими-то ограничениями, в том числе связанными с концертами. Кстати говоря, напоминаем, что 17 апреля...
Ценности. Ну, интересно, что на фоне...
Why didn't anybody go and get it off the ceiling?
Well, because it was about 25 foot high and it stuck up there. You know.
You have ladders.
Well, no one wanted to go and get it. It was quite nice. Yeah, but it was a feature, wasn't it? It was a talking point.
Petra, we've got to go. Apparently the end of the show is nigh. Thank you very much indeed. And can I apologise? I mean, this programme, this is a hard-hitting political debate show. And I don't know how we got onto Fanny. I really don't. It kind of destroyed
do you know, it really did. Can I just say hello? I was very disconcerted listening on my way in, hearing how much Fanny there was.
They put a stent on her. She also has cholesterol. She is taking all the vitamins that you have recommended. If she can get a hold of ivermectin, would that be the best route for her? Because we're afraid of any allergic reaction she could have. Well, I understand your concern.
Look to the camera.
Такой напористой политики. Я по-другому не могу просто. Для меня вот эта медитация, она необходима.
А вот скажите, пожалуйста, вот вы чувствуете себя счастливым человеком?
Ну, счастье такое относительное понятие, да? Оно не может, ты не можешь быть счастлив постоянно. То есть это счастье, это какие-то радости просто. Они могут быть
творческие.
Они могут быть абсолютно... Нет, я сейчас хотела сказать о том, что я даже не знаю, как
вот как чувствуется
моменты счастья. Ну вот как бы вот ты определил?
Ой, я тоже не знаю. Вот счастье видеть сейчас в гостях Линду. Вот я смотрю, и я счастлив.
Ну, да, это просто
вот в этот текущий момент,
правильно?
Здесь и сейчас, в этот настоящий замечательный вечер. То есть
ну
вот...
да, ну значит, получается, в данный момент,
здесь сейчас, постоянно ощущаю для себя...
Это ж мы сами придумали такое слово «счастье».
Да.
Все же оно все равно внутри. Если ты работаешь, отдаешь, получаешь с этим миром как-то, да, ты по-любому будешь настроен на позитив. Какой-то.
Что самое на самом деле главное. И ветер времени – это то, что нужно уловить. Это то, что нужно поймать, это то, что нужно почувствовать.
Да, это неощущаемо, неосязаемо, да, но почувствовать это можно. Это то, что невидимо.
И я думаю, что моей гости Линде это удалось. И этот альбом «ДНК мира» – это доказательство.
Спасибо.
Этого настоящего счастья я, собственно, и поздравляю с выходом. Ждем печати на виниловой пластинке, послушаем еще раз и завершаем эфир песней
Он в конце 18...
He's continuing to eat it.
Hi there.
This is Shannon Bangor.
You're Shannon Bangor?
In Northern
Hello,
Ireland.
Shannon
from Bangor.
It's not a bad name, though. Shannon Bangor, isn't it?
And then you deep fry it for 3 minutes either side. delicious. It does clog you up, Mike Graham burgers, battered Mike Graham burger.
You seem to retain a lot of information.
Well, there's a lot of data. We've got a big hard disk.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. Have you put it away? Have you put it away? Have you put it away?
Mix in the car.
Don't change the subject. Put it away.
Online, on DAB+, and on your smart speaker.
That really says something about where this case is going.
Talk Radio.
Gary bought a trampoline online with Visa, so he has protection if his card is used fraudulently. Now Gary's feeling pretty confident. Confident enough to try a slam dunk from his...
People, and I must write about the people I know.
Stay tuned to hear more history as it unfolds.
Test by the U.S. 45,000 samples of 46 popular crops. Spinach was the dirty runner-up in second place. Mustard greens and kale. The most common pesticide found was human carcinogen, which the EU banned in 2009. Now, rounding out the top 5 were nectarines at 4th, apples in 5th. On the other end of the spectrum, among the least contaminated produce, avocados, sweet corn, pineapple, onions, papaya, eggplant, broccoli, and mushrooms. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House call for health. CJ Papa, Fox News.
The very latest headline.
Радио «Эхо Москвы».
Полночь в Москве, в студии Яков Широков, в эфире информационная программа «Эхо». США и НАТО объявили о выводе войск из Афганистана. 4 журналиста интернет-издания «Докса» фактически отправлены под домашний арест. Вступает в силу ограничений на полеты туристов в Турцию.
Вы слушаете информационную программу «Эхо».
США с 1 мая начинают вывод своих войск из Афганистана. Об этом объявил американский президент Джо Байден.
Я считал, что наше присутствие в Афганистане должно быть сосредоточено на той задаче, ради которой мы пришли. В первую очередь гарантировать, что Афганистан не будет использоваться в качестве базы для повторного нападения на нашу родину. Мы сделали это. Мы достигли этой цели. Мы будем просить другие страны региона поддержать Афганистан, особенно Пакистан, а также Россию, Китай, Индию и Турцию.
По словам Байдена, вывод войск планируется завершить к 11 сентября, 20-й годовщине терактов в Америке. Вслед за США решение начать вывод своих войск объявили партнеры Вашингтона по НАТО. США, как передает агентство Рейтер, отменили отправку 2 военных кораблей в Черное море. Дипломатические источники в Турции говорят, что американское посольство уведомило о решении Вашингтона, но не стало объяснять причины. Белый дом планировал направить 2 корабля на фоне сообщения о наращивании российской военной силы на границе с Украиной. Россия назвала планы Соединенных Штатов недружественной провокацией. Ранее американский президент предложил в телефонном разговоре с российским коллегой провести встречу в одной из третьих стран. 4 журналистов интернет-издания «Докса» фактически отправили под домашний арест. Судьи Басманного суда Москвы Евгения Николаева, Валентина Левашова и Наталья Дударь удовлетворили ходатайство следователей об избрании задержанным запрет определенных действий. При этом журналистам можно будет выходить из дома лишь на 1 минуту в сутки. Они не смогут пользоваться средствами связи и общаться с кем-либо, кроме родных или следователей. Накануне в редакции дома у журналистов прошли обыски, рассказала редактор «Докса» Алла Гутникова.
3 девочки в пижамах, 6 утра, мы все как бы заспаны, не понимаем, что делать. Куча каких-то бойцов в балаклавах, и это все как бы очень театрально и абсурдно. Они довольно сильно давят, и поэтому очень важно знать свои права четко, помнить все статьи. Тряслись колени, сердце очень билось. Потом я выпила валерьянки или чего-то такого, и стало спокойно. Вот, и мы довольно, мы просто болтали с вот этими чуваками в балаклавах.
Дело заведено из-за опубликованного видео в поддержку студентов, которое позже было удалено по требованию Роскомнадзора. Сегодня следователи намерены допросить фигурантов. Решение правительства об ограничении авиасообщения с Турцией и Танзанией вступает сегодня в силу. Оперативный штаб объяснял ранее такой шаг ухудшением ситуации с коронавирусом в этих странах. По подсчетам участников рынка, туры в Турцию на период действия ограничений успели купить более 500 000 россиян. С чем они могут столкнуться теперь, рассказывает Алексей Осин.
В Ростуризме гражданам предлагают 3 пути решения проблем. Те, кто купил путевки до 1 июня, могут перенести отдых на более поздний срок и не менять страну. Второй вариант – попробовать поискать другое направление. Здесь в приоритетах российские курорты и места, где интересно побывать в нашей стране. При этом возникает проблема. Наши южные субъекты федерации сейчас уже не могут предложить такой же уровень сервиса. Еще в марте все места в 4-5-звездочных отелях были раскуплены на все лето. Кроме того, далеко не везде ситуация с коронавирусом внушает оптимизм. К примеру, в Крыму за последние 2 недели количество новых случаев COVID-19 увеличилось почти в 2 раза и не сложен. Турецкие партнеры, как правило, на это не идут.
Граждане, которые уже находятся в Турции, как говорят власти, смогут закончить отдых и вернуться в сроки, определенные путевкой.
Вы слушаете информационную программу «Эхо».
Ушел из жизни актер и телеведущий Олег Марусев. Ему было 76 лет. Слово Ирине Кучеренко.
О скорбном известии написал в своем инстаграме российский актер Станислав Садальский. Продолжительной болезни, причины смерти пока неизвестны. Олег Марусев родился в 1944 году в Ташкенте, закончил Днепропетровское театральное училище, позже еще получил дипломы режиссера и театроведа в ГИТИСе и Киевском институте театра и кино. В 60-х работал в театре Геннадия Юденича «Скоморох», затем устроился на телевидение, где проработал 35 лет. Марусев был автором и ведущим передач «Под знаком зодиака», «Пойми меня», «С песней по жизни», «Концерт после концерта» и многих других. В последние годы он вновь вернулся на сцену, на этот раз в Театр Луны, где был задействован в десятки постановок. За свою кинокарьеру Марусев снялся в более чем 20 фильмах и сериалах, таких как «Медная бабушка», «Очарование зла», «Графиня де Монсоро», «Марш турецкого».
О месте и времени прощания пока не сообщается. В Москве сегодня днем ожидается переменная облачность, небольшой дождь, плюс 19-21 градус. Дальше с новостями нас будет знакомить Александр Климов. Яков Широков, служба информации «Эхо Москвы».
Эхо Москвы. Свидетельств.
Сразу знакомлю вас с нашими гостями. С нами Максим Шевченко.
You will later on, but either way, a lot of options. Go get your shot, and then I'll go to wine country.
KABC, dependable traffic, El Monte, the 10 westbound before Baldwin, crash blocking the middle lanes. It's stop and go from Santa Anita Avenue. Monterey Park on the 710, northbound at the 10, crash blocking the left lane. Traffic is stopped from Cesar Chavez. Irwindale is stop and go on the 605, northbound between Arrow Highway and the 210. East LA, the 60, eastbound at Atlantic. Road maintenance operations are slowing down cars. Hollywood is slow on the 101, southbound between Sunset and Glendale Boulevards. Mid-City is slow on the 10, eastbound between La Cienega and 14th Street. That's dependable traffic. I'm Kevin Tripp on AM 790 KABC.
Hi, it's Clark.
Today's Medical Minute is brought to you by Huntington Hospital's award-winning cardiology department.
Could lend you $100.
What? That's it?
Well, it also qualifies you for the grand prize of $25,000.
Now that's more like it.
Just text the national keyword BILL to 95819. That's BILL, B-I-L-L, to 95819. We'll text you back to confirm your entry. Data and messaging rates may apply. It's the 25K weekday payday on AM 790 KABC.
Today's Medical Minute is brought to you by Huntington Hospital's award-winning cardiology department. They're here to help keep you and your heart healthy with a full range of screening and diagnostic tests, advanced medical and surgical treatments, and cardiac rehabilitation and education programs. It's no wonder that Huntington Hospital's cardiac services have been awarded by U.S. News & World Report, Health Grades, and the American Heart Association. To get started, visit huntingtonhospital.org/heart.
If you're a smoker, quitting today is one of the best things you can do for your heart. Cigarette smokers are between 2 and 4 times more likely to get heart disease than non-smokers. Next on the list, getting your blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugar in healthy ranges. All 3 factors are linked to increased risk of heart disease, and they're all things that your primary care doctor can help you get checked. So make a plan to address these at your next doctor's visit.
Terms Get middays right with John Phillips.
Oh, yeah.
And you can get it right now.
Johnny don't like the teacher. Johnny don't like the school. One day Johnny gonna do something. Show me he's nobody's.
When you down a load of battery acid, it might actually do your inside some difficulty. Or you can't use Domestos as a mixer with your gin. All of those reasons are why you and I have to endure warning signs and labels and all of these sorts of things, and I blame the internet. Rob does have common sense. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. After midnight, we're going to give you some intelligence. We're going to give you some knowledge. Because that's what we do here on Talk Radio. We're going to be sharing household tips. Life hacks. You know those shortcuts in life that actually make things easier, that make you think, God, why didn't I think of that before? I'll tell you why you didn't think of it before. The internet is the reason you didn't think of it before. You know those life hacks. Like, what's a good life hack that I can share with you? Well, here's a good one. When you buy a bunch of flowers, right? You know the Domestos that you shouldn't be using as a mixer for your gin and tonic? Drop a little drop of it in the water when you buy a bunch of flowers. Stops the water going manky, makes the flowers last much longer. So you didn't know that, did you? You didn't know that. Just a drop. You don't want to put them in the Domestos and burn through them. But you fill up the vase with water. You're looking at me like I'm from another planet. You fill up the vase with water, put a little drop of Domestos in the vase, and it'll keep the flowers fresher for longer. It will stop the water going manky. It's true. Do you want to know another one? I'm full of these. When you are hand washing something, when you're washing anything, in fact, when you're hand washing some clothes, if you're on holiday and they don't have a laundry service in the Intercontinental, or when you are cleaning up a stain that you might have made, spend twice as long rinsing as you do washing. Did you know that? Because that's what gets it clean. So if you've got a pair of manky socks and you've got to wear them again tomorrow, and you think, oh, I'll just give them a wash, and you think, oh, there you go, they're clean. No, they're not clean. Because while they're still full of soap and foam, the dirt's still in them. So spend twice as long rinsing as you do washing, and then they'll get clean. Didn't know that, did you? Didn't care, did you? No, you didn't. So yours will be coming a little bit later. You can get some in now, though, but we are going to be imparting knowledge on you to make your life much, much easier. And I know you can't wait. Hello to you, whether you're listening on DAB+. Thank you to James and Ash. I welcome many of you who were, of course, listening to them. What a lovely chat about Fanny they were having. It was lovely, wasn't it? Did you enjoy the Fanny? I used to love Fanny. I really, really did. I used to watch a lot of Fanny. I used to like spending a lot of time thinking about Fanny. And in recent years, not something I've been so much interested in. So it was nice to be reminded of Fanny. Very nice to be reminded. And, of course, Fanny went out of favour very, very quickly in my household. Very quickly indeed. And now, actually, perhaps we should have given Fanny a second look. Because some of her tips of course, Fanny Craddock, I'm talking about, the TV cook. Some of them were brilliant. Some of them will actually work after midnight, if we want to talk about them. Forgotten all about Fanny Craddock. I loved old TV chefs. They're the proper ones, not the ones nowadays. You know, I do Greek cookery with my mother, and we essentially just drink heavily and make Greek food. That's the kind of cooking I like, where you're just sort of throwing it in the pan and being a little bit more casual, more liberal with the ingredients. Nowadays, I feel it's all...
Ничего их не арестовывают.
Do you not remember the two fat ladies? Oh, they were brilliant. They called themselves the two fat ladies. Yeah, they did call themselves the two fat ladies. There were these amazing TV series. About 20 years ago, the two fat ladies were on television. They were brilliant. Keith Lloyd, as well as I said to James Whale, loved him because he was absolutely sloshed every time he did anything. And of course, Fanny Craddock. I just don't think you get TV chefs like that. They're all very dull. That's the word I'm looking for. Dull. Really, really dull. I like it when they used to have a drink and just be, oh no, throw that in there. Yeah, that's what you want. You're not watching to actually learn how to cook, are you? Or are you? Delia Smith. I mean, she went corrupt when she became a football hooligan, didn't she? I mean, before that, she was very, very, straight-laced. But then, she could have been an extra in the movie ID. Do you see the movie ID? It's about you don't watch films. What do you mean you don't watch films? What a ridiculous thing to say. You ever seen the movie ID? You don't watch films? It's a movie about a man's descent into football hooliganism. I think he's an undercover cop. And he starts as an undercover cop. It's got a guy called Rhys Dinsdale in it. Rhys Dinsdale's just been in Emmerdale, but he used to be in movies. And it's a British movie. It's also got Billy Mitchell in it before he was Billy Mitchell in EastEnders. And I think he's a copper. And he has to go undercover to become a football hooligan and to sort of penetrate this football hooligan ring. And he ends up becoming the chief hooligan, and he turns into an absolute nut job. It's brilliant. I think Delia Smith could be in that, She's heading that way, isn't she? Anyway, I digress. Because what would I choose? Would I choose hooligans as my politicians? Or would I choose the corrupt bunch of dishonest cronies that we have at the moment? And hey, it's not just now. I'm not just talking about Boris Johnson, the buffoon-like windsock that we have as Prime Minister. What does it take to get sacked by Boris Johnson? Genuinely, what do you have to do to no longer be in his government? Do you have to actually strip off, run up and down the Mall, screaming that you want to commit treason towards the government to actually get fired from his cabinet? I don't know what it takes to get fired by Boris Johnson. And you thought before Boris, well, David Cameron, he seemed like, I know you had Theresa May, but he was kind of like a hip-hop. You thought David Cameron, all right, he was all right, David, old smiley David, you thought, yeah, honourable. Turns out, looks like he's as corrupt and as wrong as the rest of them. And it's not just the Conservative Party. We can go way further back than that. And we will do. But let's remind ourselves of some Conservative cronyism, including Matt Hancock and, of course, the pandemic contracts. I mean, if you had Matt Hancock's number in your phone, you would have been offered a pandemic contract. I really think he just did a group WhatsApp to everyone he knew. What, you run a pub? You run a pub? Yeah, have a pandemic contract. Why didn't you make some personal protective gear? What are you're my driving instructor? Great, yeah, would you like to, create some COVID testing kits? Great, you can do them in the back of your Vauxhall Corsa. So that's Matt Hancock. Let's not forget his former neighbour actually won a COVID test kit contract after he got a WhatsApp message, so I'm really not exaggerating with that one. Let's not forget Boris Johnson's list of peerages, and again, anyone who'd brushed past him, maybe that's the wrong expression considering his propensity to getting people pregnant, but anyone who was in the vicinity of Boris Johnson at any time during the whole of 2019 got a peerage. You know, get a peerage. I think he did the same WhatsApp messages for his peerages. Let's not forget the MP George Hollingbury, who was appointed as the British ambassador to Cuba, which normally goes to experienced diplomats, but they just thought, oh, we'll just shove the job in. The right word for that one. And it's not just the Tories. I mean, Tony Blair, the number of times he had to stand by Peter Mandelson, I'm surprised people didn't talk. Apparently, New Labour, of course, used to stink of cronyism. Mr Mandelson had the Prime Minister's full confidence. You always know that they don't have any confidence at all after the disclosure that he accepted a £373,000 loan at preferential interest rates from a Treasury Minister. Do you remember that? So he could buy his lovely flat-fronted Georgian terrace while we're all bending backwards and forwards for the local bank to try and get a mortgage. Let's not forget about cash for honours. Do you remember that, when Tony Blair faced questioning over that one? It even involved some dawn raids. And of course, David Cameron deciding that he was going to text Rishi Sunak to try and get some Treasury loans over COVID for Greensill and the top civil servant working for both at the same time. It all absolutely stinks. So, 0344 499 1000. Genuinely, do you just now believe that most politicians across different political parties are just corrupt? After years of scandals. Do you remember Cash for Questions? Do you remember Cash for Questions? You won't remember Cash for Questions. That was one of the original ones. I mean, that was the kind of scandal that you used to, you know, the kind of traditional Conservative scandal. Because in the 90s, it was always Cash for Access, Cash for Questions, which, of course, was always a good old traditional scandal. Or you'd have a good old sex scandal. You know, Conservative MPs trudging through Clapham Common at God knows what time of night, deciding to walk the dog. Never had a dog walk like that before. So, of course, it's been years, it's been decades of all of this corruption, scandals, cronyism. With the amount of scandals that we've seen over decades, do you genuinely just feel politically homeless now? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. After years of scandals and cronyism, do you just have the feeling that most politicians are horribly corrupt? You can call me, as I said, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Of course, you can chat along as they are on YouTube. John says they're all corrupt, Christo, as does JJ. Nikki's in there, Joanne, James, Richard, Elizabeth, Paul, Proclus, Blind Fury, McKenna, Ruth, Routine, Pizza, so many of you in there with your rather strange YouTube names. Do feel free to chat along in there. Are our political leaders just horribly corrupt hypocrites? And has it made you lose faith in the political process? Are you really so faithless that you just don't know if there was an election tomorrow, you wouldn't know?
Вот посмотрите на...
Это правильную и важную информацию.
Line up in a ringside seat. Ali swings to the left, Ali swings to the right. Look at the kid carry the fight.
Everybody just gathered around, organized. And it was orderly. No kids were out of hand. They just wanted to talk. Two started throwing tear gas, and the kids were picking up and throwing them back at the cops. And they chased the kids over the hill. The cops were boxed in. There was kids all around them. And all of a sudden, cops got trigger happy and shot kids.
News as it happened. News as it happens.
This is Fox News Talk.
This is House Call for Help. The NCAA college basketball tournament is underway, but unlike other years, all the games are being played in Indiana, and that has local restaurants and bars taking steps to handle fans safely during the pandemic. Sean Bogardis is with Kilroy's Pub in Indianapolis.
In previous years, we were worried about capacity because of the fire department, but this year we're kind of worried about
capacity with the health department.
Kilroy's manager, Laura Rosenberry, says they'll have restrictions in place like mask wearing and social distancing.
We won't be able to have standing room, which is what a lot of people enjoy for March Madness.
Even though vaccinations have increased, health officials like Chicago Public Health Commissioner Allison Arwady feel the tournament remains a concern for gatherings.
The safest thing still, of course, is to watch from home and to have smaller gatherings at home.
For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health, CJ Papa, Fox News.
There's a place where America's leading voice is unstoppable, and where freedom of speech is more than just an idea, where faith is practiced on full display, and where righteousness reigns supreme, where you're encouraged to celebrate life, and where the lifeblood of our country's history lives forever. America is streaming it all in one place, Fox Nation. Sign up to experience it all today.
We're back here on the Guy Benson Show. I've been reading from this piece, "I Refuse to Stand By While My Students Are Indoctrinated," written by Paul Rossi, who's a teacher at an elite private school in New York City, and he's pulling back the veil of woke insanity that has completely overtaken this and many other schools. And these are some examples, and I think you need to hear about them. Listen to this. This is Maoist. This is really messed up. A few days later, the head of school ordered all high school advisors to read a public reprimand of my conduct out loud to every student in the school. It was a surreal experience walking the halls alone and hearing the words emitting from each classroom. And then he quotes some of this condemnation that they had to read. They are required to do it to shame and rebuke this teacher for lightly challenging the absolute garbage being funneled into the brains of these children. And doing so in a polite way, in a productive way, but that did not help the higher truths. And thus, he was ritually reprimanded. The piece goes on. I wanted to be a voice for the many students of different backgrounds who have approached me over the course of the past several years to express their frustration with indoctrination at our school, but are afraid to speak up. They report that in their classes and other discussions, they must never challenge any of the premises of our anti-racist teachings, which are deeply informed by critical race theory. These concerns are confirmed to me when I attend grade level and all school meetings about race or gender issues. There, I witness student after student sticking to a narrow script of acceptable responses. Teachers praise insights when they articulate the existing framework, or expand it to apply to novel domains. Meantime, it is common for teachers to exhort students who remain silent that, quote, "we really need to hear from you." But what does speaking up mean in a context in which white students are asked to interrogate their white saviorism, but also not to make their anti-racist practice about them? We are compelling them to tiptoe through a minefield of double binds. According to the school's own standard for discursive violence, this constitutes abuse. Now listen to this. Every student at the school must also sign a student life agreement, which requires them to aver that the world as we understand it can be hard and extremely biased, and they commit to recognize and acknowledge their biases when we come to school, and interrupt those biases, and accept that they will be held accountable should they fall short of the agreement. A recent faculty email chain received enthusiastic support for recommending that we officially flag students who appear resistant to the culture we are trying to establish. When I questioned what form this resistance takes, examples presented by colleagues included persisting with a colorblind ideology, right? Colorblind ideology is bad now, they're saying. Suggesting that we treat everyone with respect, that's bad. A belief in meritocracy, also bad. And just silence. If a student is silent, that's a problem, and a potential indicator to be flagged that they might be going astray and not fully committed to the program. So the children will be made to speak. They'll be made to speak exactly the words that they're allowed to speak only, in alignment with the ID that they're allowed to have. And nothing beyond that will be tolerated. In a special assembly in February 2019, this teacher reports, our head of school said that the impact of words and images perceived as racist, regardless of intent, which sounds familiar in the newsroom at the New York Times, is akin to, quote, using a gun or a knife to kill or injure someone. Imagine being a young person in this environment. Would you risk voicing your doubts, especially if you'd never heard a single teacher question it? All right, so words are violence, silence is violence. You have to speak, but only a certain way, and you better not think for yourself, or you could get flagged. The piece goes on, and there are more details given, including this astonishing anecdote about how the head of school explicitly said that teachers were not supposed to assign reading to students, reading assignments, written by non-white conservatives, because that would scramble the racial picture. People of color aren't supposed to think certain ways, so those reading assignments can't be assigned. They explicitly said you have to assign white conservatives if you're going to assign reading by conservatives, which is just racism. That's what that is. He also relays a story of a young man who came to see him in his office and looked both ways down the hallway as he arrived and left because he was terrified that other faculty might see him talking to this teacher and it could get him in trouble because he had already gotten a reprimand and a dressing down because he had expressed a conservative view in class recently. And I guess talking to this other teacher is subversive. Does this sound remotely healthy, this environment? Of course not. But this is unfortunately not a massive outlier within this world. And these are the kids who are going to make up our leadership in the next generation. And this is what they are being subjected to. You need to know this. And this has to change. It's not sustainable. Because if it is sustained, we are not going to recognize this country in the future. And that would be a real tragedy. Because this, as far as I'm concerned, is deeply un-American. And really immoral and racist. But they have the upper hand, at least for now. And we're going to keep talking about it here on The Guy Benson Show.
Network. Stay on top of the latest news and information from Fox News. Listen and download the Fox News Hourly Update on your time. The trending stories you need anytime you want it. Listen and download now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. The Fox News Rundown is a weekday morning podcast that dives deep into the major and controversial stories of the day. Hosted by the anchors of Fox News Radio. Subscribe now to hear a perspective of news you won't find anywhere else. Listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
News, I'm Rich Dennison. A day after resigning, the officer who fatally shot 20-year-old Dante Wright during a traffic stop in suburban Minneapolis faces charges.
Former Brooklyn Center officer Kim Potter has been arrested. She will face second-degree manslaughter in the shooting death Sunday of Dante Wright. He was shot after police pulled him over. Police say Potter grabbed her gun by mistake, intending to use a taser to subdue Wright during a scuffle.
Fox's Gernal Scott. American Airlines is expecting a strong summer for travel as more people get their coronavirus vaccinations.
American has already been adding flights in the U.S. and to Mexico and the Caribbean. It's planning 150 new routes this summer. It expects to offer more than 90% of pre-pandemic flights and seats within the U.S. and 80% internationally.
Fox's Jenny Casola. America is listening to Fox News.
I'm Ashley DeBorkin with a Fox Celebrity Profile with Demian Bashir, who can be seen in 2 films right now. Robin Wright's directorial debut Land and the monster mashup movie Godzilla vs. Kong. I asked him about this great variety of projects.
Actors, we love that. We love to transit, from one genre to another, and from one extreme to another, from a different character to an entirely different character. And I'm just lucky to have been able to do that with great films and now with this franchise.
We also discussed how making the special effects-driven Godzilla vs. Kong feels like multiple films within one project.
We go through different phases of the process because when you read the script for the first time, so your imagination is already there, imagining everything that you're reading. And then there's another film when you shoot it. And then there's another film when you watch it. And so it's a roller coaster of beautiful different emotions that you go through. And the final result is like the cherry on the cake.
Ashley DeBorkin, Fox News.
Now, from the historical audio archives of Fox News Talk.
Mahalia Jackson, who died in 1972, is widely regarded as the first queen of gospel music. Although she was a heralded and much-loved performer, she lived a double life in racially divided America.
When I'm on the stage and on television and working with white people, they just hug me and love me and say I'm so wonderful and I'm so great. And then when I'm walking down the street like an ordinary citizen, they don't recognize me. And when I go into the department store in the South, I can't get a sandwich, I can't get a bottle of pop, I got to stand, I can't even get a cab. And I'm just the Mahalia Jackson that they got through saying how wonderful I am. I don't understand this. What makes people act like that?
Stay tuned to hear more history as it unfolds before your ears. It's the audio archives of Fox News Talk.
The Dean's List with Janice Dean.
A Southwest Airlines employee who found a beloved lost toy makes today's Dean's List. After landing at Dallas Love Field Airport, Hagen and his family were driving away in their rental car when they realized the boy's Buzz Lightyear was left behind back on the plane they traveled on. When the plane arrived in Little Rock, Arkansas, a ramp agent named Jason discovered the beloved toy around the seats. Jason found a name written on the bottom of Buzz's boot that said Hagen. He did some investigating and learned there was a Hagen who had traveled on the aircraft that day. A few days later, Hagen received a special surprise in the mail. Not only was Buzz back, but he arrived in a hand-decorated box, complete with a letter describing Buzz's mission on Southwest Airlines. To infinity and beyond, we love this story. Thank you, Jason and Southwest Air. You made the Dean's List. You too, Buzz. Janice Dean, Fox News.
It's Brian Kilmeade.
Joe Biden, who everyone says, might be not the smartest guy, blue-collar Joe. I'm fine with that. Get in line. There's a whole bunch of people smarter than me. But don't pretend he's gotten older or he's just not that bright. He knows exactly what he's saying. He's trying to cleave off these different states. They're trying to tighten up their voting rules because the pandemic loosened up everything.
Listen live weekdays at 9 a.m. East or get the podcast now at briankilmeadshow.com.
Мое настроение.
Свою фразу, что вы в нее вкладываете?
Santa Monica Boulevard stalled big rigged lanes. Slow traffic from Washington. Corona has a crash on the right shoulder on the 15 southbound after Indian truck. Grand Terrace, the 215 southbound at Barton Road, crash on the right shoulder. Traffic is slowing down. That's Dependable Traffic. I'm Kevin Tripp on AM 790 KABC.
Courageous is a word that describes America's veterans. Sadly, another word we can use is homeless. During this crisis, many veterans are living on the street. You can help. Donate at cardboardtoheadboard.org.
Today's Medical Minute is brought to you by Huntington Hospital's award-winning cardiology department. They're here to help keep you and your heart healthy with a full range of screening and diagnostic tests, advanced medical and surgical treatments, and cardiac rehabilitation and education programs. It's no wonder that Huntington Hospital's cardiac services have been awarded by U.S. News & World Report, Health Grades, and the American Heart Association. To get started, visit huntingtonhospital.org/heart.
Want to give your heart health a boost? Then it's time to get moving. The American Heart Association recommends 30 minutes of exercise a day, 5 days a week, to improve your heart health and help you reduce your risk of heart disease. Not sure you can commit to that? Some exercise is always better than none. So get out there and exercise as much as you can. Do it for fun, do it for your health, do it for your heart, and do it for you.
This is your new home speaking. I know you haven't moved in yet, but I need some favors. Could you dust the blinds? The dust makes me feel dusty. Also, we could save a lot of money if you bundled your home and car insurance with Geico. It's super easy to do online or over the phone. Last favor, when you move in, could you stick to one aesthetic? The last owner had a weird mix of floral wallpaper and nautical tchotchkes, and I can't have another identity crisis.
Geico. For bundling made easy, go to geico.com today.
With no fees or minimums on checking and savings accounts, banking with Capital One is like the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Kind of like choosing Charles Barkley in a pickup game.
We'll take Barkwood.
Ha! First pick. Sorry, kids.
Yep, even easier than that. And with our top-rated app, you can bank anytime, anywhere, making Capital One an even easier decision.
Okay, here's the plan. Pass me the ball every time.
This is banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
New consumer accounts only. Approval required. Terms apply. Capital One NA, member FDIC.
Where Southern California comes to talk. Talk Radio 790 KADC.
When you end a job not very well, you don't usually go on and get rewarded. When you are someone who can't, for instance, I'm obsessed with these property loans because I just think I've got lots of friends who have trouble getting on the property ladder. I try and help them. I try and talk to them about it. I try and help them with mortgage advisors and things like that. And if I was one of them reading this stuff, it would absolutely devastate me that actually all you need to be is someone who's an MP that's got a mate in the cabinet that can give you a £400,000 loan or however much it was, 373,000 I think it was, and it was quite a few years ago. It would be substantially more required now, and you just think, well, these rules, it's a different world.
It does often seem that way, but I must say again that these scandals are often few and far between, but when they do happen, they make a big impact, and this is why Boris Johnson's decision to have a very narrowly focused review on the Greensill Capital handling isn't really going to go far enough. And I come back again to what the PRCA are calling for in terms of their 6 points to actually increase public confidence as well in terms of tightening up who lobbies government and declaring, particularly for ministers taking jobs, extending that ban out to 5 years as well, because arguably 2 years is still enough time in life for influence to still be had at this level. David Cameron wasn't Prime Minister all that long ago now.
Well, you sort of end up in a situation where you wonder why people get into politics. If you can get into politics and get into a particularly high level and then think, I don't know, is the ban for just Prime Ministers or is the ban for anyone who leaves politics only having 2 years before they can lobby?
It's all ministers at the moment, basically. But they have to take advice from it. Yes, they have to take advice from the Cabinet Office at the moment. But of course, we've also had the issue of a Cabinet Office civil servant, former Cabinet Office civil servant who joined Greensill Capital while he was still technically employed at the Cabinet Office. So the system needs to be tightened. It needs to be strengthened up. And again, I insist that most professional lobbyists hold ourselves to very high standards, and there's a clear code of conduct, but there needs to be backed up by the force of law. You can't have a toothless government regulator trying to exonerate the Prime Minister, a former Prime Minister, I should say.
Is there not a worry that then, with this 2-year limit, that you could essentially attempt to get into politics, get a pretty decent job in politics? You don't even need to be like a proper cabinet minister or front bench minister, just high enough that you've got those good contacts, leave the job, 2 years later you're earning millions as being able to be a lobbyist for them. Is that something that could be happening as we speak, that people are literally only in the job for the contacts book they'll make and the money they'll earn down the line? Because I think it must be. It's a no-brainer.
There are 650 MPs in the House of Commons and 800 members of the House of Lords. From the experience I've had with the ones I've worked with over 10 years working in Westminster, that's not my experience of the majority of parliamentarians, as hard as it may be for many people to believe that. I think what we often have is... Because there are going to be
lots of people listening, sorry to jump in, Mike, who are just going to think, well, he would say that. Of course he would say that. You're a political consultant, you're a commentator, you know about lobbying, you're hardly going to come on and say, well, I work for an area of government that is completely corrupt and I couldn't agree more. So, respectfully...
No, I completely understand. I have to, of course, people are going to have to take what I say on good faith. But Krista, you and I have been talking long enough now to know that I don't sugarcoat things. And to be honest, as I say, these scandals do make an impact. And I think there is a broader issue here that you highlighted there about people going on to take other jobs in politics, that our politicians have been coming in at younger and younger ages. Well, don't forget, David Cameron was in his early 40s when he became Prime Minister, and he was out by the time he was nearly 50. That still leaves a good chunk of his career there to fill. And it's a hard thing to do for former politicians, not in the sense of hard on them, but they have to try and find something that they want to focus their skills towards. And if there is an opportunity, then we need to tighten up on these opportunities for money to direct these resources to encourage them to take up more voluntary appointments, because they do get considerable perks. They can enjoy police protection. They do get parliamentary passes, which is something that PRCA doesn't believe that any lobbyist should hold. But again, I come back to this point that it's astonishing to have, and I will say this, that it's where the professionals that do this influencing are actually believe they should be more tightly regulated than what the government offers them. And if Boris Johnson had any common sense at all, he would listen to those calls and take up the PRCA's plans for reform.
Why isn't he, do you think?
I think at the moment...
And why hasn't he taken on as well the kind of investigation that Labour were calling for?
Well, partly because it comes from the Labour Party and there's party politics in there, unfortunately, to play. Keir Starmer was right to call for a parliamentary inquiry into this as well. We had one into the banking crisis, the Parliamentary Commission on Banking Standards 10 years ago that produced the reforms that led to ring fencing and all those things as well. There are going to be a subset of inquiries going forward from the Treasury Committee and the Public Administration Select Committee as well. But the government's own targeted internal review needs to look more broadly at the Registrar of Consultant Lobbyists, which at the moment is the government's main lobbying regulator. Yes, it has a declaratory element to it, but apart from that, it's largely toothless. And if David Cameron wants to clear his name and insists he does nothing wrong, he has nothing to fear from submitting himself to a full and transparent process. Because that, at the end of the day, is what most lobbyists want. They just simply want the activities to be conducted in a fair, open and transparent way so everyone can see what is being done by whom, for whom.
Well, it would be interesting if he did that, because maybe we'll hear about what exact lessons he plans on learning from the thing he did nothing wrong on, which seems like a bizarre position to take. Interesting talking to you, Mike Indian, political consultant and commentator. Thanks for taking the time to talk this through with Talk Radio. So are you convinced by any of that? Up close, it's not as bad. None of this is as murky as it seems. These years of scandals, cash for questions, cash for access, dodgy loans, dodgy procurement, cronyism, the expenses scandal, now this grubbiness with David Cameron. Actually, look, this is not representative of our elected leaders, and these are just isolated incidents, and when you really dig down into the detail, it's really not as bad as we think. Does that convince you in any way, shape or form? Or like me, do you just think they're all just rotten? And it's really difficult to have any other opinion, and I really have no idea what I'd do if there was a general election tomorrow. 0322 499 1000. Who's going to call? Get some of your tweets and texts and some of your calls on this as well, besides late night on Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio.
Gary bought a trampoline online with Visa, so he has protection if his card is used fraudulently. Now Gary's feeling pretty confident. Confident enough to try a slam dunk from his trampoline. Oh, Gary. Visa's zero liability helps protect you from fraud. You just can't protect you from yourself. Search Visa How You Pay Matters to find out more. Commercial and anonymous prepaid cards excluded. Responsible card use required. Contact your bank for T&Cs.
This spring, Disney Plus brings you more with Star.
Here we go.
More brand new originals like the Oscar-nominated Nomadland.
I'm not homeless. I'm just houseless.
New shows like Dollface starring Kat Dennings.
I'll see you there.
And Grownish starring Yara Shahidi.
You are so right.
Plus series you love like 16 seasons of Grey's Anatomy.
We need to calm down.
And over 300 episodes of Family Guy. There's more to discover with Star.
I'm ready.
Only on Disney Plus. 18 plus subscription required. T's and C's apply.
Philip Schofield here. Did you know there are just over 31 million seconds in a year? So why not spend 60 of them finding out how much your car's worth at WeBuyAnyCar.com? That's right, only takes 60 seconds, leaving you millions for the important things, like marveling at what a tiny speck of dust we are in the endless universe. To find out how much your car's worth in 60 seconds, enter your reg number now at WeBuyAnyCar.com.
Admin fee may apply. For more information, see WeBuyAnyCar.com/info.
Now we're gradually coming out of lockdown. We can get together again outside. Have a picnic for 6 in the park. Separate blankets and lots of space, obviously. But what if another friend walks by? It'd be rude not to invite them over, wouldn't it? The more people you meet, the greater your risk of getting COVID-19. So only meet in groups of up to 6 or 2 households. Let's take this next step safely. Remember, hands, face, space, and fresh air.
Julius Caesar here. I have trust issues. Probably because my friends betrayed me to death. So when I need a tradesperson, I don't trust them. I trust Checkatrade. They check all their tradespeople and check the reviews are real, so I know they'll get the job done right without the treachery.
Checkatrade.com.
recommendations you can rely on.
New Coca-Cola Zero Sugar. Best Coca-Cola ever.
If you have kids that go to school, it's been absolutely devastating. And the draconian lockdowns that we've seen here in California, I believe, have produced really backfire in Newsom's face.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're correct. First of all, you saw, interestingly, considering, the media, the elite media made him out to be terribly anti-Hispanic, you saw a move to, towards Latinos voting for Donald Trump. I mean, which, if they vote for a guy who talks about building a wall, clearly the mainstream media is missing some dynamic. And I think you're completely right. Also, Latinos own a lot of small businesses. A lot of them, are employed informally, where they're not necessarily going to be able to apply for unemployment if the business goes away. I'm not at all surprised to hear that. I mean, small business owners and people who work for themselves are the people who were most likely to be punished by lockdowns and who dislike them the most. And that's a lot. Whether it's somebody who owns a landscaping company or works for a landscaping company, or not to stereotype, owns a laundry or a taqueria, the small businesses and businesses that are not protected.
Alex Bernson is the guest. The book is Unreported Truths About COVID-19 and Lockdowns. There are now 6 editions, all available online at Amazon.com. Alex, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for stopping by.
John, thanks for having me.
It's 2:48. Let's go ahead and take a look at the roads.
KABC, dependable traffic, Pyramid Lake. SIG alert continues on the 5 northbound after Vista del Lago. Crash in the